The next time you're on a road trip with no particular destination in mind, think about making an odd turn here or there. Follow those old signs towards towns you've never heard of, with bewilderingly low populations. See what you find. You might walk away surprised. Or not at all. Welcome back to Unexplained Encounters. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails. Follow me on x.com/darkprevails. I'm doing a signed book giveaway for those who do a rough sketch of their favorite monster, and tweet me with the hashtag folklorefreak. This episode's stories feature small town terrors. Enjoy, and be sure to send me your scary stories of the unexplained at darkstories.org. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe and like the video if you're on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Black-Eyed Children, or Late-Night Hallucinations. From NG Loves Spooky. Just to start off, I want to say I've never had hallucinations before, nor have I had any other encounters with the Black-Eyed Children. It was a few weeks ago. I had been driving home late one night after taking my golden retriever, Julius, for a swim. I live in a small town in Australia. It was about 40 minutes from my house to the lake. I think it was around 2 a.m. That night I just couldn't get to sleep, so I had taken Julius for a swim. The ride and time there was uneventful. It was on the way back that my encounter started. I was driving home and was getting really sleepy. Like really sleepy. So, not wanting to cause an accident, I pulled over in a rest stop and reclined my passenger seat. Before really hitting the hay, I let Julius out to let him go to the toilet. Usually, Julius would run around smelling and exploring for a little bit before going to the bathroom, then heading back. But this time he stayed very close to me. Not running around, not sniffing anything. This could have been related to my experience, or he could have just not been busy. Aside from me, there were 2 other trucks in the rest stop, and the rest of the lot was empty. The place was surrounded by woods, with only a small bathroom nearby. I was cold and tired, so I waited a few minutes, then loaded Julius back into the car. I locked the doors, and I don't know how long it took, but I finally got some rest. I woke up at some point to Julius whining and what I thought sounded like footsteps and whispers from outside my car. I froze and strained my ears. Nothing. I shrugged it off and sat up, needing to use the bathroom. I was beginning to feel creeped out for some reason, but I ignored that too. I went to open my door when a quiet but rapid knocking came on my driver's side window. I turned around and saw 2 younger girls outside. The older one looked about 13, and the youngest looked about 6. They both had their heads down. When I looked at them, I felt horrified. I immediately felt bad for feeling that way. So bad that I forgot about the logical questions. Like, why were 2 kids at a truck stop half an hour out of town at 4 a.m.? There were no other cars, so had they come out of the trucks? The 2 work trucks that were for work? Maybe one of the truckers was bringing their kids around. But where were their parents? I wish one of these questions got to me first, but it didn't.
Can you drive us to the nearest town? We're lost.
The elder one said, still looking down. Her voice was soft but gravelly, like a robot speaking 1 word at a time. I was so scared, I felt sick to my stomach. How did she know she had my attention when she wasn't even looking at me? Where's your parents, sweetie? I asked, as calmly as I could.
They're in the town,
she replied.
Please, miss, it's cold.
The youngest one spoke. Before I even realized it, I was in the driver's seat, unlocking the door to let these kids in. That's when Julius, who was usually friendly, growled and barked at me, snapping me out of my trance. I locked the door again, and just at that moment, the oldest girl grabbed onto the door handle on the outside, trying to yank it open. She then looked me dead in the eyes. Her eyes were pitch black, as if her pupil had made up her entire eye. For a moment, I was shocked and flooded with fear. Then all I remembered next was flooring it down the highway. As I looked back in the rearview mirror, I saw both the girls looking straight into my eyes. They both had those chilling black eyes. I turned that half-hour ride into an 8-minute ride. I rode around town until sunrise, too scared to get out of my car or to pull over in the dark. Now and then my sensor light will come on, which seems to be happening more and more lately, but this could all be a coincidence. The girls could be one of the truckers' kids that were parked at the rest stop, or just some kids looking for a scare with some contacts. Heck, it could even be me being really tired and having a very creepy hallucination. And as for the sensor lights, it's a small town. It could be some wild animals or someone walking about. All I know is whatever they were, they disturbed me. The Crawler of the Pine Forest, from Owl Watcher 23. I was talking to my old friend Gerard the other day. It brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years. With a trip planned back to my hometown in rural Maine next month, it's all been on my mind lately. So let me tell you this story that I've been thinking about. Gerard was my closest neighbor and my best friend back when I was 13. Living in a sparsely populated area meant neighbor was a loose term. His house was a good 20-minute walk through winding dirt roads and dense woods from mine. We both lived on the outskirts of a small town, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and the general store closes early. One summer evening, Gerard and I decided to walk to the local convenience store to grab some snacks before it would close at 8 p.m. It was a warm night. The store wasn't too far, a manageable trek if we took the unpaved roads cutting through the woods. "Think we can make it before they close?" Gerard asked, checking his watch, looking concerned that he wouldn't get his Little Debbie snack cake tonight. "Only if we don't get sidetracked," I laughed. We were notorious for letting little adventures delay us. We set off, our packs light and spirits high. The woods were deafening with the sounds of crickets, as well as the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. We were chatting about the usual things, like upcoming baseball games, as we were both big fans, and our plans for the rest of the summer. I recall mentioning some rumors that new kids might be moving into town. About halfway there, as we rounded a bend in the road, I thought I heard a faint rustling sound behind us. I glanced back, but didn't see anything. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" Gerard replied. "I guess it was nothing. Probably a raccoon." I shrugged it off. We continued to walk, but the feeling of being watched nagged at me. Slowly, the sounds of the woods began to fade, and we assumed it was because we were nearing the edge of the forest. A few minutes went by. Gerard stopped. "Okay, you had to have heard that," he whispered. This time, the rustling was more pronounced, accompanied by the subtle crunch of leaves and twigs snapping. We both turned around slowly. At first, we didn't see anything unusual, just the dirt road stretching into the distance behind us, flanked by shadowy trees. But then, in the dimness, I spotted movement in the underbrush to our right. There was someone there, partially concealed by ferns and low-hanging branches. "Who's there?" Gerard called out. No reply. The figure didn't move, It was really low to the ground, almost as if lying flat on their stomach. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. It looked human-like, but they were crawling on the forest floor, inching forward slowly. Maybe it's a hurt hiker, I suggested, but I didn't fully believe that. No, we should keep moving, Gerard said. He was right. We picked up the pace, our casual stroll turning into a brisk walk. Every so often, we'd glance back. The figure was still there, maintaining a constant distance, definitely following us. Whenever we stopped, it stopped too. When we moved, it moved with us. Okay, this is seriously creepy, I admitted. Gotta be some kind of prank, Gerard offered, though he didn't sound sure. We were getting closer to the store, the path becoming more familiar and less dense with trees. Relief washed over me at the thought of reaching a place with other people around. Just as we were about to exit the wooded area, we lost sight of the figure. In a panic, I looked around, scanning my surroundings. Do you see it? I asked. Gerard shook his head. Maybe they gave up. A sudden sense of dread settled in. I looked up instinctively, and I found it. Halfway up a tall pine tree to our left, the figure clung to the side of the trunk effortlessly. It was facing us, still watching, motionless. The fading light made it hard to see details, but the outline was very human still, though its limbs were long and seemed to wrap around the tree unnaturally. Gerard, I whispered, nudging him. He followed my gaze and gasped. Holy crap. Just as he said it, the figure tilted its head slightly, as if acknowledging that we'd seen it. That was enough for us. We bolted toward the convenience store, adrenaline carrying us there. The branches whipped past us as we tore down the path. Bursting through the door of the store, we startled the clerk behind the counter. Whoa, slow down there, fellas, he said. Can we use your phone? I panted. We need to call our parents. He must have seen the urgency in our faces, because he slid the phone across the counter without further questions. Gerard dialed his mom. All the while, I peered out the store's front window, wondering if I could find the figure again, still lurking at the edge of the parking lot. But I didn't see anything, just the dim woods and the evening sky. Our parents arrived shortly after, concerned and a bit confused by our frantic calls. We told them someone followed us through the woods, but we left out the more unsettling details. They chalked it up to overactive imaginations, perhaps a vagrant passing through. For a while, we avoided taking the wooded paths, opting for the longer route along the main roads whenever we needed to get into town. A couple of weeks after that, Gerard and I were hanging out at his house. He'd recently started dating a girl named Amelia. She went to our school, but she lived on the opposite side of town. She came over that afternoon to watch movies and just hang out, a casual get-together. As evening approached, the conversation drifted to local legends and spooky stories, as it often does with teenagers looking for a thrill. Have you guys ever felt like you're being watched out here? Amelia asked casually. Gerard and I exchanged glances. Why do you ask? She hesitated. I wasn't going to mention it because it sounds crazy, but something happened to me a few nights ago. Tell us, Gerard urged. Amelia took a deep breath. Well, I was in my room drying my hair after a shower. My room's on the second floor, and there's this big window that looks out onto our backyard. There's a tree that's pretty close. My dad's been meaning to trim it back. She paused, twisting her fingers nervously. Go on, I encouraged. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was just branches swaying or maybe a bird. But after the third or fourth time, I decided to look directly. She looked at us, her eyes serious. There was someone or something clinging to the tree trunk. It was about level with my window. It was shaped like a person, but not quite. Its limbs were very long, and it was holding onto the tree like it was nothing. A chill ran down my spine. "What did you do?" Gerard asked quietly. Well, at first I froze. Couldn't believe what I was looking at. Then it tilted its head at me, like it was acknowledging me. I snapped out of it and screamed for my dad. He came stomping up the stairs, but by the time he looked out my window, it was gone. "Did you tell him what you saw?" I asked. She nodded. "He checked the yard, but didn't find anything. He said it was probably just a shadow or my imagination, but I know what I saw." Gerard and I sat in silence for a while. Something similar happened to us," I finally said, recounting our encounter on the way to the convenience store. As I described the figure following us, the way it moved, how it clung to the tree, Amelia's face went pale. "That's gotta be the same thing," she said. Over the next few days, the three of us tried to figure out what it was, or at least discussed it. We considered logical explanations first. A prankster, some misidentified animal, maybe even a gas leak or something. But none of that fit. It didn't end there, though. There was a rash of stories around town. Others had seen things in the woods too. They felt uneasy in areas that were once familiar. A couple of kids we knew mentioned seeing shadows where there shouldn't be any, or hearing unusual sounds at night. One evening, determined to get to the bottom of it, Gerard suggested we try to find this figure. "Are you insane?" Amelia protested. "We should be staying away from it, not trying to seek it out." "I just want to know what we're dealing with," Gerard insisted. "Maybe if we can identify it, we won't be so scared, and we can tell others it's nothing to worry about." Reluctantly, I agreed to go with him, mostly because I didn't want him to be alone, but only on the condition that we'd be careful and turn back at the first sign of trouble. We planned to head out the next afternoon, thinking daylight would offer us some safety. Amelia refused to join us, but made us promise to keep our phones on and call her if anything happened. We set off toward the area where Gerard and I had first encountered the figure. The woods felt different there, scarier, haunted. As we walked, we kept our eyes peeled for any signs and any movement. We were out there for hours, without incident. I was starting to think it was a wild goose chase, and that made me relieved, because I didn't want to encounter it again like Gerard did. But then I saw Gerard stop abruptly and freeze. "Do you smell that?" he asked. I took a whiff. There was a faint, foul odor, like decaying plants and something metallic. We followed the scent to a clearing. In the center stood the remains of what looked like a campsite. Charred wood, scattered ashes, and bones. Small bones, possibly from animals. "Maybe hunters," I suggested, though I honestly had no idea. Gerard knelt down, examining the ground. "These look fresh." A sudden rustling came from the trees behind us. We spun around, hearts pounding. I nearly screamed when I saw it. There, partially hidden among the foliage, was the figure. It was standing upright this time, not even attempting to hide or conceal itself. It was tall and slender, limbs elongated, joints slightly distorted. The face was obscured in shadows, but I could tell it was staring at us. "Time to go," I whispered. We backed up, slowly, before turning all at once and running. The underbrush snagged at our clothes, but we weren't about to let that stop us. We burst out of the woods soon, onto a familiar road, completely out of breath. While we were running, I remember hearing the sound of branches snapping, and to this day I think it chased us. Whatever we did, we managed to tee it off. But out of the woods now, I think we were fine. "That's it," Gerard said between gasps. "No more. We need to tell someone, an adult." We agreed to speak to the local authorities, but when we did, our story was met with polite skepticism. They suggested we were misinterpreting natural occurrences and might be the victim of someone's idea of a joke. Feeling helpless, we decided to let it go and focus on staying safe. As the years passed, the incidents seemed to fade. We went off to college and life moved on. But every so often, I would hear about someone back home having a strange encounter in the woods. A traveler passing through would mention feeling watched. A local would tell a tale after a few drinks at the bar. Now, with my trip back home approaching, all those memories are coming back to the surface. I can't help but wonder if that figure is still out there, lurking among the trees. Gerard mentioned he's noticed odd things again. Small signs that something isn't right. We joked about it nervously, but there's an undercurrent of genuine concern. I want to be able to dismiss it all, that some sort of sloth or bear was getting into our heads, that we never got a good look at it and made up a monster in our minds. But still, deep down, I think it was something more. Should we go looking for it again? The Witch from Gomez Palacia, Mexico. From Drodlo Era, 92. This is my first time telling one of my many stories that I've heard from my mother. It's an encounter many wouldn't believe actually happened, but I feel it's time to share her story with you all. This happened many years ago, when my mother was a child, in Torreon, Coahuila, Mexico. A city known for its Lala milk. Maybe y'all have seen it in our local supermarkets. My mother was one of 13 siblings, 9 boys and 4 girls to be exact. My grandpa was a train conductor, and my grandmother was a stay-at-home wife. My mother really did a lot. She seemed to be the one who had to make sure the older children would be in charge of their younger siblings properly. One day my grandmother went to the store, taking a couple of hours to do so, as she didn't drive and had to take the bus. Meanwhile, my mother and 3 other brothers were playing in the back. My uncles were playing basketball, and my mother was sitting watching them play, until she noticed something. There was someone in the corner of her eye, inside the house. In the back, there was a door that led to the kitchen, and it was wide open. Only my mother saw it. It was the ghost of a man wearing a top hat with a suit. The man was also calling for my mother, beckoning her with his finger to come here. He seemed to want to show her something. All of a sudden, my mother started to cry and scream. That's when my grandmother got back home and was upset at my uncles, thinking they had done something to upset her, and they got in trouble. My uncles were clueless as to what was going on and had no idea why my mother was screaming. That evening, all the family went to another family member's home. They cleared up the table and had some dinner. My mother had to wash the dishes afterward. While she was washing and cleaning the dishes, there was a window that saw over the entire backyard, and the property was somewhat big with trees and plants. My mother glanced and noticed the same entity she'd seen before. She started to cry, and my godmother's mother noticed. My mom said, "That man, he's out there looking at me and wants me to go with him." They then went outside with lanterns, searching the backyard, but finding no one. Then comes the last ghost contact that my mother had. This time, another family member saw it. They had a priest come to the home to do a cleansing. The pastor read some Bible verses and put some holy water on my mother and around the home. This didn't go too well, because the thing came again, and this time it wasn't shy. My godmother's mother came face to face with this male figure and went to where the ghost was pointing at. It was pointing at the kitchen floor. Eventually, they would demolish the house, as it became hard for the family to live in and upkeep. They found a big chest underneath it, and inside this chest was a ton of money. This made my godmother's mother's family quite wealthy. Once they found the money, the entity finally went away, so I guess his soul was now at peace. The Townhouse Mimics, from Bell's 1992. My story happened back in 2007. I was 15 years old back then. I lived in a townhouse in Virginia with my mom, stepdad, my older brother, and his wife at the time, as well as my older sister and little sister. One day, I can't recall which day of the week it was. All I know is that it was very nice outside, and it was a day where I wasn't in school and no one else was home. I was upstairs in my room reading my book. This was a room I shared with my older sister. As I was reading, from downstairs I heard in my mother's voice,
Mi hija, ven aquí por favor.
I called back, "Okay, Mommy, coming, just a sec." I put my book down and headed downstairs, saying, "Yes, Mom?" The kitchen was really close to the steps at the bottom, so I entered the kitchen, and I didn't see her. I scratched my head, thinking, what the heck? I swear I just heard her. Maybe she went to the living room. So I checked in there, but there was no one. I got a bad feeling in my gut, but ultimately brushed it off. I went back upstairs to my room, closed my door, then went back to my reading. About 20 minutes later, I hear, "Hey, Bells, come here. I need your help. Come to the room." I was confused because I thought my brother was working. So I replied, "Hey, Evo, what are you doing home? Don't you work today?" I then hear clearly, "Yeah, but I took the day off." Confused, I wondered why, so I walked into my brother's room. But his room was empty. There was no one there. I looked in his closet. No one. And again, I had this bad feeling. I walked back to my room, but faster this time, locking my door. I went back to reading my book again, but I was more scared, telling myself how the heck it was possible to hear both my mom and my brother's voice, yet no one was here but me. I also remembered a time my brother told me one day he was sick. He was home alone at the time. I think I was either hanging out with some friends or I'd gone jogging. Can't remember, honestly. I borrowed my brother's wife's phone, and I got a call from my brother, saying, "Hey, Bells, didn't you hear me calling you?" "No, bro, I'm not home. How would I hear you?" "Bells, stop joking around. I can hear you right now in your room." "Evo, I'm seriously not home. See, I'll show you." I went back home as I was done with whatever I was doing. I opened the door to the house and said, "See, Evo, I'm home now." My brother looks at me so confused. "Dude, you're probably just not feeling well. Didn't sleep good or something. Go take a nap." But I knew in my gut that wasn't the case, because it has happened to me, always when I'm home alone. But I didn't want him to worry. There was also a time I remember I was home alone again. I had taken a nap and it was cold outside, and I just wanted to stay in. I can't remember where everyone went that day. Anyway, I heard my older sister's voice coming from downstairs in the living room. I'll call her E. She was saying,
"Where the heck did you put my shoes you borrowed? I can't find them. Stop touching my stuff."
"E, I haven't used your dang shoes since last time. You must have misplaced them." I heard the voice that sounded like my sister say,
"Well, come and help me find them then."
So I went downstairs to help her. And as I go down, I almost went to the living room, and I see the door behind me open. It's my sister E. I stopped and told her, "Stop messing around." She looked at me, confused. "Bells, I haven't been home all day. Stop being annoying." I told her I wasn't being annoying. I had literally just heard her a minute ago, and I explained that. He replied, "Stop, you're being irritating. I just got here." She went upstairs and I walked into the living room. I saw a figure in the shape of my sister and ran right back upstairs to my brother's room, staying there until my older sister went to look for me, asking me why I didn't go to our room. I told her because she seemed annoyed at me. She then asked why I was crying. But I kept the actual encounter to myself. I didn't want to be seen like I was weird or crazy, but honestly, to this day I still remember it, and it scares me. Now that I'm older, and I've done my fair share of paranormal research, maybe I had an encounter with demons who mimic. From what I've read, they can sound like any of your loved ones. One thing I'm grateful for is that this thing never made itself present to my little sister. I wouldn't want her childhood to be a scary thing. That's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a tough time for me, and a creepy experience to recall. I'm 32 years old now, and these memories still give me chills. Strange events in my small town, from Asahi-kun. I live in a city in northeastern India. My parents and I always go to our grandma's house on holidays and occasions in the countryside. I'm 18 years old, and the small town or kind of village that my grandma's house is in is full of farmland, houses, and small woods. This town is like any other ordinary town in our state, but throughout the years, people have seen some weird things. There are countless stories, but I'll write which ones I remember most. The oldest one was told by my dad when I was little. He said that he and his friends and some of my uncles were drinking and talking in the cabin attached to the back of my grandma's house in the backyard. The backyard is attached to a small pond and a few square kilometers of woods and farmland, since my family from my mother's side owned many parts of the property. They were enjoying themselves when they saw this fireball-type thing. It wasn't attached to anything, like a stick or a lamp, and they didn't hear any footsteps, and they saw no one. An odd detail is that they said the fireball was blue. At one point I remember seeing that those were associated with spirits and other things like that. This next incident is a bit more foggy. My aunt was cooking in the kitchen and she heard a whistle in the backyard through the window in the kitchen. After some time, my dad and one of my uncles went back to throw away the previous day's trash. He said that he saw a guy using our abandoned toilet in the backyard. This toilet was made by my grandpa, since many people in the area are very poor. My dad and my uncle approached this man, asking what he was doing out here when he just said that he was there to use the toilet. However, my uncle was sensing some danger, as if the guy might be a robber and was scoping out the place. He and my father came back to the house to pick up some tools, a phone and torches and a safety knife. Of course, when they came back, the guy was gone. I mean, they just went in for a moment, and my aunt in the kitchen was looking out at the guy at the same time. One of my uncles, who was out at a party late at night, was coming back when he heard something following him. The road that night was dark, mildly foggy, and no one else was there. A cliché, I know. So of course he got scared and began looking back with his phone flashlight and walking faster. When the footsteps started to creep him out, he played God's prayer on his phone and began walking faster. But after just some steps, his phone died, and he could hear the footsteps now chasing towards him. He sprinted through our backyard, as it was sort of a shortcut. Our backyard and farmlands are connected to the road. When he came home, I don't remember what happened, but I do remember him saying to his mother, my grandma, that someone had been chasing him. The next morning, he told the full story. Most of my family members basically shrugged it off as a mild paranormal incident. As I said before, this town had some very weird stuff going on, so it's natural to become used to it after some time. In 2019 or so, God worshippers and town community held an event where they sang God's prayers to ward off evil spirits in the town, since at that time a lot of suicides were going on, and many people believed that spirits were the cause. So, what was really going on in the town, I guess we'll never truly know. A town secret. The possession. From Born to Be Wild. My mother Sherry had died in 2007 when I was 18 years old. By that time, I felt like I'd lived an eternity already. My life began in a small town of Haines, Alaska, and spanned across the United States, and I eventually landed in the small town of Seabrook, New Hampshire. In the blink of an eye, it seemed, I was standing at my mother's funeral. She'd been my best friend, saving grace, the glue that held the family together. What happened next was an entirely different story altogether. I'm here today to tell you one of her stories. I'll take a shot in the dark and say it was 1970. She was 17 years old in our hometown of Haines, Alaska. This was a small fishing community, forged from fishermen and gold prospecting, resting in the Chilkat Valley in southeast Alaska. Originally settled by an Indian tribe called the Tlingit, whose village and tribe is still there to this very day. It was a beautiful small town, being in a valley surrounded by mountains on the coast. The people there have always been very friendly and welcoming, and everyone knew each other and came to events like either big sporting events at the high school or big celebrations or softball during the summer, and of course, church on Sundays. Everyone except for the Mitchells. The Mitchells never attended anything and very much kept to themselves. The Mitchells family consisted of Eric Mitchell, the father, and Rebecca Mitchell, the mother, and lastly the daughter Cassie. They were always invited to every event, but they would always decline. It was a Thursday afternoon and my mother was at the bakery when she ran into Mrs. Mitchell. Always curious, she excitedly asked, "Do you think your daughter Cassie would like to come to our book study Friday night at 7? Rebecca looked at my mother sympathetically and said no. My mother immediately thought that Mrs. Mitchell must think that her offer was a front for partying or mischief, and replied, "Oh, okay. Well, what about chorus practice Saturday afternoon at the church on Main Street? She would be more than welcome, and we need another singer." My mom said Mrs. Mitchell's face turned paler than normal, and she abruptly turned and walked away. My mother, weirded out and confused, went back to what she was there for at the bakery, and that was to get biscuits for her stepmother Eva. The following day at the church on Main Street, my mother and her friends were practicing for chorus as usual. It was a normal day. They were trying to decide which songs they would sing and practice for the following Sunday morning at church. Finally, they came up with 4 songs, and they began their practice. They were halfway through the second song when the front door just slammed open. They all turned and saw Cassie Mitchell, the daughter, standing in the doorway. In a low voice, she said, "Why doesn't anyone love me?" Confused and dumbfounded, my mother and her friends said nothing and only stared in her direction. After a moment, Cassie slowly continued her approach, now screaming at the top of her lungs in a shrill voice. "Why doesn't anyone love me?" She continued turning left and right, flailing her arms in the direction of the church benches, screaming and repeating, "Why doesn't anyone love me?" She continued forward. My mother had been in the center of the group in the direct path of Cassie's approach. Eventually, Cassie was face to face with my mother when she stopped and glared into my mother's eyes. She smiled and said in a normal voice, "You love me, don't you, Sherry?" My mother said she didn't know how Cassie knew her name, and in that instant, the world around them grew dim. Then Cassie's eyes turned into dark, ugly pits, and Cassie's face twisted and distorted. She looked now like an old hag, and her teeth became longer, not pointy, just longer. My mother was completely frozen to the spot, but she said calmly, "Of course I love you," then turned and fled to the back room, followed by her friends. When they were all inside, they peered out the door to see if Cassie was still there. She was gone, and they would actually never see Cassie again. Stories and the news spread like wildfire about what happened at the church that day. The Mitchell family immediately moved away without a word. Some natives in the town believed that a Kushtaka had murdered the daughter Cassie and took her place. Kushtaka, or Kushdahaka, translates to Land Otter Man. They're mythical shape-shifting creatures found in the folklore of the Tlingit peoples of the Pacific Northwest and southeastern parts of Alaska. My mother and most of the town, being devout Christians, believed that Cassie was actually demon-possessed and soon agreed to never talk about the incident or about the Mitchells ever again. My stories I share here are 100% true, and I swear it on my mother's grave that I will never share a story here that did not happen. Thank you for listening, and always remember that no noise happens for no reason. The House Behind the School. From Aria. This happened when I was in 5th grade, only just 11 years old and a curious kid. Back then, I lived in a small town in Montana that was basically a couple churches, a grocery store, a few restaurants, and businesses. I lived with my mother, grandmother, and middle sister in my great-grandmother's house. She had passed away a year before we moved in. My younger sister and my dad lived in a different town. I had 2 friends back then, I and B. We don't talk anymore, but that's not the point. One day, B's older brother and his friend, who was a year older than us, went into this abandoned house behind the running track that had the football field in the middle. When the 2 boys went into that house, they saw it was full of pictures of a little boy, and it looked very dusty. B's older brother found a check and picked it up, but eventually just left it there. Later that night, though, he found scratches on his back. The next day, the 2 boys told B, and she told us. At first, we didn't believe the boys, but then later that night, when B saw the scratches on her older brother's back, we knew it was real. We discussed this and decided to visit the house ourselves. But of course, my mother said no. However, being the curious and dumb kid I was, I told her I was going to go to homework club. That day, us 3 girls went to the house after school, and the 2 boys did follow us, asking us if we were going in the house. We, of course, lied, saying we were just going to check out the outside. The 2 boys went in from the back, and when they came out, B's older brother said, "We locked the doors so you girls can't go in." We didn't know if they were lying too, but we never did figure it out. When the 2 boys were gone, I spoke. "Why don't we look around the outside first?" And the other 2 girls agreed. We walked right under a window on the side that was closest to us, that had wood and a carriage wheel leaning against the wall. But then we heard big footsteps on the top floor of the house, and we ran until we were on the school property again. Even so, the house was not out of sight. I looked back, and from one of the windows, I saw a hand that was paper white. The other girls saw it too, and we were terrified. We then spotted the window that we had just been under. There was a shape of a head through it. A head that was far too big to be human, and the neck was too wide and too tall. We quickly went back to the student parking lot, but there was a trail of hair ties in the parking lot. That's when my mother's brown Jeep pulled into the parking lot. Of course, she was ticked, but ever since then, I felt like something was watching me. Once we moved from there, I haven't felt anything. At least, not yet. But that's not the only thing I've encountered. As I said before, I lived in my great-grandmother's house. I was sleeping in my mother's room one night. This was the same year I visited that abandoned house. My sister was also sleeping in there, and both our little cocker spaniels were in there too, sleeping on the floor. I was the only one awake at the time. I began to hear these steps coming from the kitchen. I was creeped out. I woke my mother up and told her about it, but she told me it's just the dogs and fell back asleep. But the steps were too light to be the dogs, or to be my grandmother's, who lived with us. And the cat never came downstairs because of the dogs, not to mention my cat had just disappeared recently. But after a while, the steps disappeared. At the time, I had no idea what it could have been, but now I think it was my GG, which is what we called my great-grandmother. After a while, we had to sell that house for financial and other reasons, and we moved to another small town, which has its own stories. Old logging site. From Dandy. When I was a sophomore at a small college in northern Oregon, there was a place just outside town that everyone knew about, but few dared to visit alone. It was an old logging site, abandoned decades ago when the timber industry dried up. Locals would call it the Hollow, and it had become a sort of rite of passage among students to spend a night there. The legend went that back in the 1930s, a logger named Samuel Harper went missing after a dispute with his foreman. Rumor had it he was cheated out of his wages and swore revenge. One foggy morning, he walked into the woods and never came back. Some said he got lost and died of exposure. Others believed he was murdered and buried somewhere on the site. Over the years, people claimed to see his ghost wandering among the stumps and rusted machinery, still seeking justice. My friends and I were skeptical, but intrigued. There was me, Jenna, a psychology major, my roommate Alex, an art student with a penchant for the macabre, and Ben, a geology major who loved exploring old sites for rocks and minerals. One Friday night, after a few drinks at the campus bar, we decided it was time to check out the Hollow for ourselves. "Come on, it'll be fun," Alex insisted. "We can take some cool photos, maybe even find some artifacts." Ben shrugged. "I've been meaning to collect some samples from that area anyway." I hesitated. I didn't want to be the buzzkill. "All right then, but let's be careful about this. That place isn't exactly safe." We grabbed flashlights, a camera, some snacks, and piled into Ben's old Jeep. The drive took about 20 minutes. Before long, the paved roads gave way to gravel and then dirt. The trees got denser, and the branches got thicker, to the point that the canopy blocked out the moonlight. By the time we arrived, the air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. We parked near a rusted gate that barely hung on its hinges still. A faded, "No trespassing" sign dangled precariously. Ignoring it, of course, we slipped through a gap in the fence. The site was a sprawling expanse of overgrown vegetation, decaying buildings, and remnants of logging equipment. Massive stumps dotted the landscape. It was kind of creepy, because it reminded me of the headstones of a graveyard. The silence was only broken by the distant hoot of an owl. "Spooky," Jenna whispered. Alex began to snap photos, her camera flashing like sudden lightning strikes. She took pictures of twisted metal, shattered windows, graffiti left by previous visitors. Ben wandered off toward a dilapidated shed. "I'm gonna check this out," he called over his shoulder. "We should stick together," I suggested, but he was already out of earshot. We followed a narrow path that led deeper into the site. The ground there was uneven, littered with roots and hidden holes. I nearly tripped over a discarded saw blade half buried in the dirt. "Guys, look at this," Alex said, pointing her flashlight at a tree. Carved into the bark was this crude figure, an eye with a jagged line through it. "Just kids messing around," Jenna said. She sounded more hopeful than certain. As we moved further in, a thick fog began to settle in, creeping between the trees and obscuring our view. The temperature seemed to drop too, until we could see our breaths in the cold air. "Maybe we should head back," I said. "Just a little further," Alex urged. "I want to get some shots of the main mill." I didn't like the sound of that, but we pressed on anyway, until the looming silhouette of the old mill emerged from the mist. It was a truly impressive and massive thing. Roof caved in, walls covered in moss. The air felt heavy here, and I felt nothing but unease. Ben appeared, holding a small rusted box. "Look what I found," he said, prying it open to reveal a collection of old coins and a faded photograph of a stern-looking man. "You think that's," Jenna began. "Samuel Harper?" Ben speculated. A sudden snap of a twig made us all jump. We spun around, shining flashlights in all directions. The fog cut the light off early, doing nothing more than creating eerie shapes. "It was nothing, guys," Alex said, though she didn't sound convinced. But then we heard something else. A moan that seemed to come from the very ground below us. "All right, that's enough, guys. We need to leave, and now," I said firmly. We started back the way we came, but the fog was only getting thicker, and the path was no longer clear. The trees all looked the same, too, and I was starting to panic. I wasn't the only one. "Which way's the gate?" Jenna asked. "I thought it was this way," Ben said, pointing to what looked like a trail. We followed, but after several minutes, we seemed to be going deeper into the woods, not the way we came. We heard the moaning sound again. It sounded close. "All right, who's out there?" Alex called out. Silence. Then, faintly, we heard footsteps, or rather, the dragging of feet through leaves. "Run!" I shouted. We took off darting between trees and over obstacles. My heart was trying to rip itself from my chest. I could hear the others behind me. They were panting. Suddenly, Jenna screamed, and I skidded to a halt, turning back to see her on the ground, clutching her ankle. "I twisted it!" she cried. Ben and I rushed to help her up. Alex was frantically scanning the surroundings with her flashlight. "Something's out there," she whispered. I looked around too. The fog continued to swirl, and then a shadowy figure emerged about 20 feet away. It looked like a man, dressed in tattered clothes, face obscured by shadow. His posture wasn't right, and his limbs were a bit too long, head tilted at an odd angle. "What do you want?" Ben called out, immediately hostile. No response. The figure took a slow, deliberate step towards us. "Carry her," I told Ben. "We have to go." We half carried, half dragged Jenna as we stumbled through the forest. The figure followed us, never quickening its pace, but somehow always getting closer. The moaning grew louder, sounding anguished, never really sure what it was coming from. "There's the fence!" Alex shouted. Sure enough, the rusted gate appeared ahead. Summoning the last reserves of our strength, we pushed towards it. We slipped through the gap. I could feel the metal tear at my clothes. Once we were on the other side, the moaning finally stopped. The fog seemed to linger at the tree line, not following us out, like it was being held back by some invisible barrier. We didn't stop until we reached the Jeep. Ben laid Jenna gently in the back seat, while Alex and I jumped in. "Go, go, go," Alex urged. Ben started the engine and we sped away, the tires kicking up gravel. About a minute later, as we drove, we felt confident we were safe and began to talk, wondering what it could have been. At the campus health center, Jenna was treated for a sprained ankle. We told the nurse we'd been hiking and lost track of time, avoiding any mention of what really happened, which included some light trespassing. Back at the dorm, we sat there quietly for a while, and then began to process the night's events. "That wasn't a ghost," Ben finally said. "It was something else." "Man, whatever it was, it wanted us gone," I replied. Alex pulled out her camera. "Great. It's junk now." We gathered around the camera to take a look. It was on, but the screen was all distorted and pixelated. She reset the thing several times, but the screen remained the same, as if the circuit board had been shocked or got wet. After that, we agreed to never return to the Hollow, and from then on, we decided to put a little weight in the old legend of Samuel Harper. Sure, what we encountered that night may not have been him. Maybe some old, creepy, hard-of-hearing security guard or groundskeeper stumbled upon us and was just trying to get us to leave, but that doesn't explain the moaning and the netherworld-style fog. Maybe I could find out if I went back to the Hollow and checked things out again during the day. But daylight or not, I don't want to go back there. I'm not the guy in the movies who sees something terrifying and goes right back a day later. No thanks. I'm gonna stay home, drink too much coffee, and read or watch stories with people that make stupid decisions. Thank you for tuning in to Unexplained Encounters. If you're not already, follow and listen to Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Leave us a rating while you're at it. Get some cool creepy merch at eeriecast.store. Check out my other show where I narrate scary work stories. It's called Tales from the Break Room. For more terrifyingly entertaining shows from eeriecast, go to eeriecast.com. And if you want to listen to Unexplained Encounters and all the other eeriecast shows without pesky ads, sign up for eeriecast Plus at eeriecast.com/plus. You'll also get exclusive access to horror audiobooks only available to eeriecast Plus members. And you'll get 20% off our eeriecast.store merch through our members-only monthly discount code. Finally, if you have a scary story of the unexplained, send it to me at darkstories.org. I think that's about it. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.